My name is Wallace Gator Bradley, and I'm the host of the Bradley Report. I'm also the president of United in Peace, Inc. This show is being produced and directed by none other than the chairman of United in Peace, Inc., which is Terry Marsh. And I'm blessed by God to be married to her. She's the one that helped research information about my guest. He's a personal friend of mine, and our Eugene Pincham. But he's going to be able to tell you that story, and so will I. With that being said, to God be the glory. Let's get on with this show. March 17th, 2020 is a very important election. Okay? And the judicial races for the circuit court, for the appellate court, for the Supreme Court of Illinois is just as important as the presidential race. As you see on the news or in the news, everything that the president wants to do and everything that the Democrats don't want him to do, they have to go and see a judge. So without further ado, let me introduce my friend, Appellate Court Justice Michael B. Hyman.
Thank you very much.
How you doing, sir?
Good.
Could you tell my viewing audience a little about yourself and about our history? But before we do that, let me share something with you. Remember this headline.
So back in 2006, I was appointed by Justice Mary Ann McMurrow to the Circuit Court of Cook County. It was her last selection before she retired, and I was very proud to being selected, and it was to a countywide vacancy. And so I had to run in 2008 countywide. And that's a race that results in a lot of individuals wanting to be judged. And in that particular race, there were several individuals seeking that same seat that I had. And I turned to Mr. Bradley to help in my campaign in 2008 when I was running for the primary. We worked together going to churches and organizations throughout the South and West Side, weekend after weekend. And then a week before the election, on a Friday night, I received a phone call from Frank Main, a reporter at the Chicago Sun-Times, stating that one of my opponents had raised an objection to the fact that I had retained Gator to be someone assisting me in my campaign. I saw nothing wrong with what I did. I was proud of what I did. And I told the reporter just that. He said he understood. In fact, he knew Gator, spoke very highly of him, and said he had been running and involved in various campaigns throughout the county and the city for years for many candidates, except the difference was that I was not black. I was the first individual he had assisted who was not black.
Right.
And on the morning, a Monday, the headline in the Sun-Times said, "Former warlord working for judge." And when I learned about that, one of the things I did first thing in the morning was decide that we would have a press conference that day at the county building.
No, it's City Hall, right?
City Hall.
Right.
And invited Justice Eugene Pincham, who's a friend and a mentor of mine, to be there. When I was sworn in as a judge by Justice McMurrow, Justice Pincham came up to me and he said, "Whatever you need, whatever I can do, I will be there for you." And I was very blessed that when I made my presentation that prior August to the primary, to the Democratic committeeman, the individual who spoke on my behalf and nominated me was Justice Eugene Pincham.
That's right.
And at that time, Justice Pincham said that we were gathered at the Palmer House, and that he remembered the Palmer House very well because he used to work there. And when Justice Pincham came up from Alabama and came to Chicago to go to law school at Northwestern, he had a young family and he needed a job. And what he did is, and he told this story to all the committeemen, is he went to the Palmer House because he figured he could wait on tables, and he saw the maitre d' of the restaurant, the large restaurant there at the hotel, and the maitre d' said, "Well, I'm sorry, but we don't hire students. But if you come back without your books, I'll talk to you." So a couple of days later, Justice Pincham came back. He spoke to the man, and the man gave him a job. But he did more than that. What Justice Pincham said is that man made it possible for him to study as well as wait on tables. And they had a room set up in the boiler room downstairs in the basement of the Palmer House. And that Justice Pincham would go there, and they had a curtain where he could study between waiting on tables. So he was able to do his stool work, make a living, and continue his studies. And he said that what everybody needed to understand is that if it wasn't for that maitre d', he may never have been able to graduate from law school, let alone be able to take his courses and have the money and resources to do so. And as we all know, he became one of the, if not the greatest trial lawyer in the history of the state of Illinois.
A good appellate court judge.
An appellate court justice, yes, and then a candidate for mayor. And he said that the maitre d' was Jewish, and so we all have to work together. We all have to come together and help each other. And that's what he asked the committeemen to do. And through his support, the committeemen endorsed me. So then a week before the campaign was going to end with the primary, the front page story comes out, and I call Justice Pincham, who is at that time ill with the cancer that would eventually take his life. And he was at University of Chicago Hospital, and he said, "I'm coming. I'll be there for you." And he did come down. Gator was there, and we had several speakers, but no speaker was as eloquent and as forceful and as energetic as Justice Pincham, who was dressed in his traditional cowboy hat, his cowboy boots, his beige suit,
Right.
and you didn't know he was ill. He just told it the way it was. And through that, and the result of the next several days, which Gator and I became a news item, not only in the Sun-Times, but in other papers, on the radio, and on television. And all that created a buzz, including the then still being published as a newspaper, the Chicago Defender.
Right.
Came out with a piece in which they said that we needed to help Judge Hyman. And through that and through the efforts of Gator, the result of that election was a victory for me. And I've been on the bench now a total of about 13 years. 6.5 of those years I was on the circuit court. In the last 6.5 years, the Supreme Court saw fit 6.5 years ago to have me assigned to the appellate court. And so that's where I've been sitting for 6.5 years as an appellate court justice. There are 18 elected justices, and as the most senior assigned justice, I was made to replace Justice Neville when he was ascended to the Supreme Court, and now I must run in order to remain on the appellate court, and that's where we are today.
Right. You know, I interrupt you because it's key that people understand that the judicial races are very important. But what he shared with you, our viewing audience, is the importance of unity in the name of justice. I was there, and there was people saying that no one of Jewish descent can be elected countywide. And the black committeemen, after Judge Pincham has spoke, and the Jewish committeemen, And then some of the other white committeemen came together and said, hey, we're going to change that. Carl, I see you. We're going to make it where anybody that's worthy, that has integrity, and will uphold the Illinois and United States Constitution, they ought to be elected judge. He became judge. Now he's running for the appellate court. And here is Gator again with Michael B. Hyman. Caller, I see you. Talk to me. Straight and stay. Say your name.
My name is Joseph Broom, and I have a question, not just for this particular judge. Maybe you can answer for a lot of other judges as well. When you look in terms of police brutality in Chicago, a lot of times it's the same police officers doing the same thing over and over again when it becomes a pattern. And it gone before certain judges, and it don't even raise their eyebrows. And we wonder why we have at least about $500 million in lawsuits pending against the city. Why did some of these judges didn't do anything when it's the same line of time, the same police officers time and time again?
You know, let me answer. The judge can answer it the way he want to answer it. But I want to say this. As I start off the show, and it goes right to your question, it's because we don't take the judicial races serious. Judges come back up for retention. And because we don't take the judicial races serious, they get back in there. But the last election, we was able to get rid of a judge that was sitting on the bench because she was a bad judge. You know what I'm saying? The community took the judicial race serious. And you're 100% correct. When I read in the Tribune where this judge named Nicholas Ford, you might know him, Nick, they call him Nick Ford or something like that. He resigned from the bench.
He retired.
Yeah, he retired from the bench. And he was an assistant state's attorney that was responsible for prosecuting people that was tortured by the bad police officers, and he sat with the officers. And it came out. So, all I can say, brother, I'm going to let the judge answer that for you, but my solution is that we need to come out strong on these races. That's why I brought him on to my show. I'm going to be bringing other judicial candidates on to my show for people to call and ask that question. But, Judge, if you'd like to speak to the question.
I can just talk generally to what we do in the appellate court. And what you're talking about, mostly what's happening in the trial courts. And when we get an appeal in the appellate court, we can look at the record, we can look at the issues being raised by the lawyers for the individual who's been allegedly victimized by the police. And those cases are extremely important. They're extremely important to me. Over 70% of the cases in the appellate court are cases involving criminal justice issues. So I spend most of my time involved in deciding issues involving our criminal justice system. And I guess one way I can describe my approach, because what you need to do as a voter is understand who the people are that are making these decisions.
That's right.
The decisions that judges made are only as good as the judges themselves. We need understanding judges. We need judges who are willing to be courageous. And I've had several decisions that I have made.
Over that people versus Jamal Johnson?
Yeah, and cases like that. And I've had cases involving some of the Burge people where we reversed the cases with regard to those people and said that it was wrong, obviously terribly wrong, and as well as other police officers that I've been involved in cases with regard to allegations against them as well. And those are very troubling cases, to say the least. But I had a case some time ago where it got on one of these blogs, and somebody made a comment on the blog who was trying to attack me. So let me tell you what the attack on me was. The attack on me was that I was a progressive and a warrior for social justice. Well, so was Justice Thurgood Marshall.
Right.
So is Justice Ginsburg. So is Justice Sotomayor. There are many justices and judges that are warriors for social justice because that's what it's about. We must follow where the law takes us, and we must be courageous to do that. And that's what I do every day as I sit there, is to review and make sure that justice is done in the individual case that's before me. And that's all I can do as a judge. And I do that by expressing myself in writing, based upon the precedent, based upon the facts, and based upon reason and logic. I guess one way to try to explain this is that I'm someone who is very hold in high regard Abraham Lincoln. And there's something Abraham Lincoln said when things were kind of difficult for our country. And he made it in words that seemed like to me to be a prayer. And he said, "May the Almighty help me for the cause of truth, justice, and humanity, that none of them should suffer in my hands." Truth, justice, humanity. That's what it takes to be a judge. To find the truth, to see that justice is done, because people are human beings, and we need to treat even those who may do bad things. They're still human beings, and we still need to be treated fairly, rightly, and respectfully, no matter what. And one of the things I've done that not too many judges do is, in my decisions, I don't call the person who's usually called the defendant. I call them by his or her name. They have an identity. They are a person. And I'm speaking to them through my opinion, because win or lose, that's the individual I want to know that their cause, their problem, their situation was listened to, and was discussed, and was reasoned, and why the result is the result it is. And in many cases, as you know, I've reversed cases. I've dissented when cases where I don't agree to the result of my brethren and sisters on the bench. But in the final analysis, what all judges try to do, and I believe most of us do extremely well, is see that justice is done.
Like one of the cases, People versus Clifton, where this lineup, the defendant was the only person with a certain hairstyle.
Right.
You made a decision in that case?
Yeah. I said it wasn't fair. What happened in that case is in the lineup, the clothes and the way he looked were suggestive enough that the witnesses were clearly going to see this individual having the same characteristics of the person that they accused of the crime. But a good lineup would be people that are similar in characteristics. That their clothing shouldn't be a giveaway, because maybe it isn't that person. Maybe it's somebody who has the same colored shirt. I mean, I had another case where they arrested somebody because somebody said a man with a purple shirt was running around with a gun. Well, somebody happened to be in a park and he had a purple shirt. And the police stopped him and arrested him right away. So that we have to be careful how we treat our lineups and everything else, and I didn't think that particular lineup was fair.
Right. You got another case. I don't know if you can speak on it. Yeah, no, you can't speak on that because they're still being hit. They're still being heard. A lot of things that you as a judge, sitting judge, can't speak on certain issues because the case may end up before you.
Right.
You know.
Right.
But
Well, I can tell you there's cases that really have struck me as a series of 3 cases I had over the last couple years, each involving a homeless individual who had a record of thefts, minor things, drug offenses, no violent acts. In particular, one man spent half his life in jail, in and out of jail and prison, because he was homeless and needed to support himself, and he stole, not from people, he stole usually by stealing things. Something to eat, from vending machines. So one day he stole $44 worth of quarters from a vending machine, and he got caught, and because he was Class X, because he had been in jail several times, the judge had a decision to make, whether he gets 6 to 30 years. That was the decision. And the judge gave him 12 years for stealing $44, which they caught him with the $44. And when we got that case, the decision was 2-1. I wrote the majority. And I said that's not right. $44 is a minor crime. And he should be released. He's paid his debt. 6 years is more than enough. That's the minimum. I think the legislature should change it. I don't think that's right for nonviolent individuals who are in that situation. Should not be treated so harshly. And because it was 2-1, he was released, and the Tribune actually found his family. We were very thankful for what happened. And we had 2 other cases similar to that. The most troubling, in my view, was a third in that series, where a man stole $34 in underwear from a store. He was homeless and he had a drug problem. Now, you don't steal underwear in order to sell it. I mean, this man was desperate. And the 2 women in the store caught him. They caught the underwear from him, and they were taking him out the front door when a police car came by, and they flagged the police car. And when he went before the judge because of his drug problem, he also was facing 6 to 30 years. And the judge gave him 10 years. And I said, not only is that not fair, for the same reason in the case of the man with the $44, but I quoted Nelson Mandela, because Nelson Mandela said that how we treat those in our criminal justice system speaks of how we are as a society. And I believe in that. I mean, how we treat the poor, the homeless, the widows, our children, as a nation and as a community, speaks volumes about who we are as a people.
We are, right.
And I said, this doesn't speak of our society. This is not the society that we want, when a man who's desperate, who's homeless, should get 10 years in prison. So I said he should be released after serving the 6 years. Unfortunately, my colleagues didn't agree, and it was 2-1, and I was a minority, so he still remains in prison to serve out his sentence. So it's difficult, and as your caller said, I mean, these are difficult issues, and judges, each of us, try hard to do what we think is fair and right. And we can all disagree with judicial decisions, but it's important to know all the facts, to know what's happening, which sometimes is very difficult. You just get tidbits in the papers.
Right.
We don't know everything goes on, but sometimes we do know a lot more, and we do have perceptions.
Right.
And one of the most important things is how we perceive justice.
Right.
Because you have no justice if you don't perceive justice.
If you don't receive justice,
Then
correct.
where is justice?
Correct.
And so it's really important to have on the judiciary individuals who understand that and seek to do justice.
You know, Justice Hyman, I'm glad you stated that point, because there was a lot of pressure that was being put on you when you made the decision to allow me to be a consultant when you ran for office. And it was assistant state's attorneys, a guy by the name, I think his name was Saxton or whatever it is. I believe he was on the gang crime. And he was pushing that issue. That's what the headlines, warlord, to scare the people, as if you have brought someone that didn't care about justice. But you knew that I had got a pardon. You knew I had been in the system, and you did your due diligence, just like I did mine. And for the viewing audience, he would tell you, when he come to me, he didn't come with a check in his hand and say, Gator, come on. Yeah, I got paid for my professionalism afterwards, but I did my assessment of him. Because anyone that I'm pushing to be blessed by God to get elected to that bench in judgment got to have moral fortitude. Can't be someone that's going to go with the police because he got to go with the police because he's a part of the system that want to lock away individuals, and they're not seeking justice. And that's why the caller asked that question. We've seen a lot of them judges. Just like some of the judges that voted against him, with him being the minority out of the three, in the case where the man got 10 years. It comes back to us. We as voters got to make the right decisions. And I see my time is about to be up. But I want to say this. Vote March 17th, 2020 for Michael B. Hyman to be Appellate Court Justice representing Illinois. Michael B. Hyman. Think about Hyman allowing an individual who has changed his life around with the help of R. Eugene Pincham to work to make people vote to put a judge that has compassion on the bench based on the evidence and the Illinois and United States Constitution. Again, please get up, vote, don't choke. Let it be known that Gator says, please vote for Michael B. Hyman to be elected Illinois Appellate Court Justice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you, caller, for calling in and asking that question. To God be the glory.